Rhino and Grasshopper canvas. We're going to go ahead and drop the ladybug component onto our ladybug canvas. It's important that we do this because this is the component, if you double click, that contains all the code that we need to run any of these ladybug components. So without this, nothing's going to work. So make sure before you start that you do this. So we're going to import our EPW, so our weather data. Just type in import EPW. This brings up a component. And we're going to need, obviously, the EPW file. There are many ways to bring in that EPW file data, but I'm going to just work with the one that allows us to pull that data from the website through a URL. And that's the EPW and stat weather files. So if you just double click and type in EPW, that will come up. You can see over here that all of the components, the inputs have an underscore before and after. If it comes before, it means we need that input, otherwise it will not run, the component will not run. And if it comes after, it means it's optional, okay? So we definitely need the weather file address. So if you navigate back to the Energy Plus website, so if you navigate back to the Energy Plus website and arrive at the climate that you need the weather data for, you right-click on Download All, okay, and click on Copy Link Address. This is where you need to right-click again and copy link address. All right. Back in Rhino, we are going to drop that URL onto a panel. So in order to do that, you double-click on the canvas, type in // and then Control-V, so you paste that address, and it's going to come in a nice paddle, just like that. We can adjust that size. And we're going to plug in that URL, making the component go gray, which means it has all the input it needs. And then we're going to do the same here, EPW into EPW. Okay, great, and that goes great. Okay, and now we're going to visualize the weather data, and we're going to use a 3D graph. So if you click on Visualize Weather Data, number 2 tab, and use the 3D chart, the first one, that's all we need. So as you can see here, when we run through it, there's a lot of underscore before and after. We only need the ones, obviously, before. If it comes before and after, it means that's also optional. So input data, basically, we're going to be bringing in either, either of these variables can go in there. Let's just start with dry bulb temperature. And so what happens is the dry bulb input data is going to be visualized in the top window of your Rhino canvas, as you can see over here. And obviously, if you want to do this with relative humidity, just plug that in. You can see over there, change relative humidity. Great. Let's just look total sky cover, see what that looks like. If you're interested in putting in 2 components at the same time, that's possible. All you have to do is hold down Shift, and you'll see a sort of green arrow and plus sign, and then add that as well, and that'll be plotted right below based on the sequence of when it was placed in input data. Great. I'm just going to disconnect that for now and just put in dry bulb temperature to start with. Just go through these components. Base point basically controls, obviously, where 0, 0 of this graph is. If you'd like to control that, you can obviously put a point in the Rhino canvas. And then you're going to have to set that point. So if we double click and type in point, great, and we're going to plug that into base point, awesome. And then we're going to right click on point, set 1 point, and then click on that point, And you see how it moves essentially. So that controls its location on the Rhino canvas. Obviously, the X, Y, and Z scale controls the units of the graph. The X and Y are related to each other. I think the default is 0.25 for the X scale. If we decide to play around with the Z direction, for instance, you move that to 2, you'll notice that if you go to perspective view, you'll see in the Z direction how your climate data is plotted, right? We don't necessarily need that here, but that is definitely something you can control, right? So we can see how that data begins to looks weird in the top view. I'm just gonna take that off for now and just work with a flattened Z scale. So that's just in the X and Y where we have control. Okay. The legend parameter is basically allowing us to control the legend, which is the color scale you see over here. That colors our climate data along this range for your given climate. So we can customize that, and there are a number of ways to do so. The first being is we can use, I'm just going to move everything to the side so we have more space. Okay. So we can select the upper and our own upper and lower bounds, just simply using, a panel if you'd like. We can maybe if we only care about 0, and let's say we know that above 25 degrees, we're outside of our thermal comfort zone, degrees Celsius. So let's maybe use just these 2 upper bounds. This can come in handy when we're starting to compare climates, right? We want to control the scale. So you can see how it's adjusted that scale pretty quickly. The climate data looks a bit crisper with that range. So that's one way of doing it. You can also change the colors of the legend itself by using the gradient. So if you double click and choose a gradient, you get this sort of swatch, gradient swatch. If you right click on any of these 2 circles, you can now just choose something a bit more up your alley. I'm just gonna play around with both of them. Okay, great. And this component, as we can see, is still orange, mainly because it needs us to give a T parameter. And T, if you hover about it, over it, it's basically sort of the number of units, how we divide between this range 0 to 1. So we're going to need a series component. We're going to plug in there, and 0 to 1, let's give it a number value of 0.1. So that should make the component go gray. And we're going to plug that into custom colors. And that should change our legend in a second, as you can see, right? So that's one way to customize the colors. Another way is to just use the gradient library that's already input already in Ladybug. So I'm just going to disconnect everything for a second and use the other type of gradient library available. So if you double click on the canvas and type in gradient, Ladybug gradient library, which comes up pretty quickly, you'll notice that there is, if you hover above gradient index, there is about 24 different color gradients that are already presets. We're always using 0, which is the original Ladybug preset. If you double click and, I don't know, choose one of them, number 5 was the sunlight hours, great. It's bright yellow. And plug that into custom colors. Oh, it's gray, perfect, okay. So, you know, I think cloud cover works really well because of the graininess of the data. Black and white really works really well for cloud